everyone to Season 4 of the Sister Stories podcast. The aim of this podcast is to marvel at God's sovereignty over each of our lives as women and to encourage each other by sharing our stories. My name is Sophie and today I'm joined by Patrycja.
Hi.
Hello. So first of all, can you tell us who you are?
Sure. I'm Patrycja. I'm married to Matt, the tallest person in the entire church. We are both Polish, but yeah, we've met in London. We are married and now expecting our first baby.
Oh, exciting. And what do you do?
So I'm a psychologist, but I usually work in business settings. So I work with leaders, boards, teams on various business aspects. Culture, like organization culture, leadership, communication, so on.
Excellent. So we're going to start by your family background and your upbringing. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you were brought up?
Sure. So it was a very happy childhood, I would say. My parents are non-believers. So it was an atheist home. There was a lot of science that we kind of focus on. With both my parents actually. But God was never in the picture. Although Poland is a very Catholic country, we were kind of beside that and not really going to church as well. So I wasn't practicing any faith back at home, although my parents were very tolerant.
Is that quite common in Poland?
No, not really. Yeah, not really. So most of people actually back then, they would either associate themselves with being Catholic, like a fully, kind of participating in all the rituals and then being in the church, or they were just going to church. But either way, they were kind of associate themselves more with God, I would say, than I would normally do.
Yeah. Does that mean that you felt quite different to other children around you, or not really?
Not really, because those who were just, going to church on Sunday, they weren't really practicing. So they weren't really religious as well. So I wasn't that different from them, probably.
Okay,
yeah,
that's interesting. And so how did you hear about God for the first time, or how did you hear the gospel for the first time?
So yeah, that's quite an interesting story.
A long way.
It was a long time.
Okay. Should we go back a little bit then?
Sure.
So yeah, was there anyone around you that was a Christian, or not really at all?
No. So in Poland, how it worked back then, especially now, it has changed a little bit. But back then, when I was growing up, if it wasn't the Catholic Church, it was actually considered as almost a cult. So everything else was really, really looked down upon. It was really a taboo topic as well. Not really. Interestingly enough, my parents, although they are non-believers, actually one of our believer friends recently said that the values that you can see in my parents' life and behavior, they do resemble the Christian ones.
Yeah.
And he actually thinks of them as an example of it's an interesting story because they're non-believers, but they actually act like ones.
Yeah.
I didn't have a Christian kind of friends or friends of friends. I didn't know anyone who would be born again, I would say.
Okay. So can you take us through what changed then in your life that made you, that drew you to God, really?
So I was already in London. I think I was 19 going to 20. No, I was actually older than that, sorry. So this is where I started my studies, and actually summer before my master's, so I was probably around 22. My cousin from Poland, whom I didn't have really relationship with, so she's a daughter of my dad's brother, and they became Christians. They were the only ones in the family, so it was quite awkward as well. But we never knew each other. We have grown up with, in different parts of Poland. So we haven't seen each other. We haven't had a relationship together as well. We weren't visiting each other. My dad was always kind of on the phone, I remember, with the rest of the family, trying to persuade them it's still okay, it's still your son, and it's, trying to keep the relationship going in some shape or form. So when she reached out, I was really pleased. I was like, yeah, sure, that's a chance for us to reconnect. You can come and visit and stay for the summer. So she did. And I remember we were watching Prison Break, a TV series she recommended. It was a month before I was about to start my master's. So we were watching it in my room, both like together, but on separate laptops. And she had to pause because she had to go to the toilet. And when she did, she unplugged her headphones, and I've heard music. And it was, it was a nice, catchy music. It was a very important part of my life back then as well, because it was all around words and the meaning, and so yeah. And so it was a Christian song, basically. I didn't realize, but as soon as I've heard Jesus, I was like, oh, okay, this is weird or odd. So when she came back, I started asking questions about that song. And it turns out she's going to, because it was a Hillsong song. And she said she's going to that church, to their church. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. And I've actually asked her whether I can come with her. So she was shocked because we, for the past 2 months, we haven't even touched on faith, or we haven't spoken about God. No one has ever preached gospel to me. So she was really like, what's happening? Surprised, but obviously happy. So we went.
And that was in London, wasn't it?
That was in London, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What did you think of the church? What was your first reaction to it when you went there?
Surprised, very surprised, in terms of it was in a theater, there was music, so it was really, really different to what I thought church is, especially growing up in Poland. But I was intrigued at the same time. And I remember there was a preacher from the States on that day, and he kind of, luckily for me probably, he kind of led the sermon almost the same way we do here at Cornerstone. So he read the entire passage, and then he was going verse by verse, unpacking it. And when I've heard what he was just, reading off the Bible, I was shocked. Like, I could not believe these are the words in the Bible. It sounded so smart and so obvious. And I was like, everyone should live this way. Like, what's going on? So I was really, really surprised, to the point that as soon as it stopped, I turned to my cousin and I said, can we come back next week? And we did. And again, the passage was, the Bible passage was so powerful. It's like, there's no other way. Like, why would you live, any differently? And that was the moment when I actually made that decision that this is it. And, it was kind of deep down that I kind of longed it for that. And it was like something, felt that hole you have in your heart. It's like, okay, now it's complete. It just felt like that.
That's interesting. So was that pretty instantaneous as soon as you heard, or did you have to listen a bit more and question things a little bit?
No, really. We always joke with Matthew that it took him 4 years to actually, kind of convert his faith and what he believed about it. And for me, it was within those 2 weeks, I would say.
Wow. So did you then read more of the Bible, of the Gospels maybe? Or
Yeah. So it's it was interesting from, just carrying on and having a normal life to going to church, and then obviously my life changed completely. I was in church every Sunday. I was heavily involved during the week as well. Bible studies, groups. We were doing outreach among the homeless people, some stuff with kids as well, and women ministry. There was a lot of it all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And yes, and although it was a church that doesn't really, doesn't carry a good opinion when it comes to theology, from the very first moments, I was so hungry, I think, to get to know God, to get to know the Word. I was listening to John Piper, Paul Washer, MacArthur. So I felt like I was in that place, but God kind of protected me. So I saw stuff that I, that kind of didn't agree with, that I saw they weren't in the Bible. So I was questioning things as well. I was going to the pastors, asking really challenging questions. Yeah.
Was that because the church was more charismatic? Maybe
it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would you say that the teaching you heard Sunday after Sunday was quite consistent overall, or not necessarily?
No, not necessarily. So it really depended. And I think just because I was doing the extra homework at home, it really helped. Yeah. Really helped, yeah.
Yeah, so that really built your faith more than the sermons necessarily. Yeah. It's really interesting that that first sermon, though, was so fundamental in your faith, because it could have been another Sunday where the sermon wasn't as good. And I mean, obviously, God is in control of that, and he can still bring you to him even through that.
And it was interesting because it was a guest speaker. So the normal sermons were in a different shape or form. They were more either topical, or it was more, based on a verse and then the whole kind of ideology behind it. So it wasn't the same way.
That's interesting. Yeah. What did your cousin think? Was she really excited, or
she was?
Did she help you a little bit with your questions as well?
She was leaving in 2 weeks. So yeah. She was really, really at the end. But she was really struck by it. I remember she loved it. And as soon as we told her parents, because they are from charismatic church as well, there were some challenges there. But then again, I was just so motivated, and I knew I want to be with God. Like I knew this is my path, that it was hard to derail me at the very beginning.
Yeah. I'm curious to see if, even if you were not really in touch with them, knowing that there was a Christian family within your family, whether that had an influence on you, whether maybe that made you a bit more open to finding out, or what? Well, maybe you don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I became aware that they are in a different faith. You can say that when I was 16. So not even before that. And like I said, just because her parents were really in a charismatic church, they still are. Even when I became Christian, it was her mom challenging me, or, you're not speaking tongues, so you're not born again. I was like, hold on, the Bible doesn't say this.
Okay. So not necessarily the most helpful things, but in a sense, sometimes you need these kind of questions to make you think and to actually see, okay, is it actually what the Bible says, or
because I think I spent 3 weeks non-stop studying the topic. I was like, how can you say this? Like, I knew I felt differently, and I knew I felt I'm with God. So I really had to, dig deeper, to actually get back to her.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, how did your faith develop after that? How did you carry on growing in your faith?
I think, like I've mentioned before, I was so hungry that all my spare time I just spent studying it. Listening to different preachers, being involved in different groups, hearing people's testimonies as well, making sense out of that. So it was just, God was every day, basically. And I think that really helped. Yeah,
great. What did your parents think as well? When that happened?
They were surprised. They did not see it coming. I did not see it coming. But I think I remember when I decided, okay, the next step will be to be baptized. I remember I sent them a text, I'm about to be baptized. And they just, they were very loving, and they just responded, oh, okay, we're happy for you, I guess.
Yeah.
Just tell us whether you're changing your name or not, because in Poland, this is,
yeah. Did you do that in Poland, actually?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, you baptize a baby and you give them a name, so they just didn't know what to expect. But yeah, I think at the very beginning, they probably thought it's a phase that I'm going through, a change maybe in my life, because I was out of a very toxic, I would say, relationship. So it was 2 years after that I became a born again. So maybe they thought it's a phase, or maybe it's connected. But obviously now it's more than a decade.
So
and
you can't say that anymore.
They've changed their mind.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Would you say that they're still open-minded enough that you can have conversations with them about it, or not really?
Oh, very much. It's a very interesting case, because my dad his experience of a church is very drastic in terms of the priests and the hypocrisy there, and the kind of sin that's going on, because he was brought up in a small village, so everything was almost at display. So he will be the one starting the conversation with us, and everything, a simple conversation about the grass or a football will lead to a conversation about God.
Wow.
So it's very hard not to talk about it. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm just praying that, some of the seeds are actually planted and we see the light.
Yeah, for sure. And that's interesting to be so open to it, and yet it's been a decade, as you say.
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't know God's timing, do we? But that's really interesting. Great. So if we take things further a little bit, so you've been in the UK for a while then.
Yeah.
How long roughly?
This June, last June 2023 was 18 years.
Wow.
So it was 18 years in Poland, and now 18 years and few months in
half
the UK.
And half.
Yeah, it's like, wow, time flies.
And you met Matt at the church, didn't you?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Great. So how long have you been married for?
In May will be 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
So 12 years together and married for 10.
Oh, great. And you've arrived in Kingston a couple of years ago, is that right? Or?
So no, we've been in the area for the last 7 years.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
But yeah, we've been in Coniston almost 2 years now. But we've been very heavily involved. So after Hillsong, we've been very heavily involved within a Polish community and Polish outreach. So it was either Hammersmith or Ealing Broadway. So for the prior Cornerstone, we were commuting for the last 5 years. We were commuting to Ealing Broadway every Friday, every Sunday, sometimes during the week as well. And we, at one point, the core team, kind of some of the people moved back to Poland, and we just decided that it's maybe time for us to settle down. We wanted to have family, and we wanted to have a more local church.
Yeah, hence Cornerstone.
It's Cornerstone, yes.
Wow, okay. So, yeah, if we take things to the last year, is there anything in particular that God has taught you in that time?
Yes, I would say, we all know that He is in control and everything happens within His timing. Yeah. But I think last year, and I knew that as well, like I do suffer kind of health-wise. So, my trust in God is really, it's not a surface level. Like I've learned to depend on Him, to lean on Him. But last year it was especially, that lesson was especially important to me. And it's a personal story because we lost our second baby at the beginning of the year. And then almost straight after, I found out that my cousin from Poland, a different cousin, she's pregnant. And it sounds normal, but she's the last person you would expect to get pregnant. In terms of her life is chaos. She was the one cheating on her husband. There was a divorce, alcohol, smoking, fast food, like everything imaginable. She was doing it, not in her favor. And yet God decided otherwise. And in that moment, I was like, wow. So no matter what I do in terms of, I don't know, diet, supplements and this and that, it will be his timing. It will be his will, and he will do exactly what, what's best. And so that was the kind of lesson that really, I had to pause for a moment.
Of course.
And really got to my bones in terms of he is in control. Like, he will make the impossible. He's the definition of impossible.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And now you're expecting, so
and now
you just don't know what the timing is to you.
And it was, again, in the least expected times that I got pregnant. It was the most stressful time at work. It was a surprise, basically. So, he did what he wanted to and when he wanted to.
Exactly. That's great, isn't it? Yeah. And that's a great lesson to learn. Sometimes it's going to be through these really difficult times. And as you say, if you're struggling with health, especially, that's going to be quite a serious thing. So, he just grabs our attention, doesn't he? Yeah. Somehow.
Has a way of doing that very,
in whatever way we need, really. Yeah. Great. And I guess to close, if you had any advice to give to younger Christians, what would you say to them?
Younger Christians. Maybe girls especially. I would say the most profound and powerful probably lesson I've learned after I became a Christian was to, again, we all know that, we all say that, but actually to live this principle that God is first in your life. So I was already a believer. I was walking with God. I think it was half a year after, where I actually had to learn that, I was really longing for a relationship, someone close. I'm really family and people oriented. So that was a huge and important part of my life. But I've reached a point where I actually had to say, okay, Jesus, if it's just you and me for the rest of my life, I'll be okay with that. Like, I'm fine. I don't need anyone else to make me happy or to whatever. Do life with me. Like, you are enough. You will give me what I need, what I want, and everything is in you. But that was, again, like a very profound, deep down moment that I had to come before him. And I met Matt 2 weeks after. So again, and not because of that, but looking back, I know I would go into that relationship completely different if I haven't make that choice beforehand. So there was a reason, why my previous relationship was so hard as well, why I had those priorities mixed up and messed up as well. So I think in order for me to, have a healthy and a happy marriage that I feel like we do have now, I had to set the foundations right. And that was a big step of it.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, actually. And I think, it's very easy to just have so many things in our lives that grab our attention. But actually, as you say, he needs to be the first thing, the foundation of all things really in our lives. Otherwise, we're not going to go very far, are we? That's what we need, really, most importantly. Great. Thank you so much, Patrycja, for sharing your story with us. And thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Sister Stories. That's all for today, but join us again next time.